Todd Monken may have finally realized just how big of a mess he signed up for in Cleveland. Because now he's about to go head-to-head with the one team that knows him better than anybody, the Baltimore Ravens. And honestly, I really think these matchups could turn into a nightmare scenario for the Browns. Baltimore already knows exactly when they'll face Monken in 2026. And once you start looking at the current state of Cleveland's offense, things get even more concerning. Because there's a huge difference between calling plays for Lamar Jackson and a loaded Ravens roster, and trying to survive the AFC North with a team that still has major question marks all over the offense. It's officially locked in. The Ravens now know exactly when they'll face Todd Monken for the first time since he left Baltimore to become the Browns' head coach. And honestly, this is one of those games that instantly stands out on the schedule. Because this isn't just Ravens versus Browns anymore. We're talking about a coach who helped build one of the most dangerous offenses in football, and now he's trying to beat the same team he knows from the inside out. Monken had a massive impact on Lamar Jackson's development. You could clearly see how much more aggressive and comfortable the passing game became during his time in Baltimore. And what's interesting is that even after leaving, Monken continued publicly praising Lamar. Multiple times he made it clear how much he believes in him as a quarterback. There's obvious respect between both sides. But in my opinion, all of that changes once these teams step on the field. AFC North teams do not take it easy on division rivals. The first matchup happens in Week 6 in Cleveland, and then they'll meet again in Week 16 at M&T Bank Stadium. And honestly, I think both games are going to feel completely different from a normal regular season matchup. Monken is going to want to prove he can win without Baltimore, while the Ravens are going to want to prove they never needed him to stay dominant. And there's another layer to this that makes everything even more interesting. The Ravens know exactly how Monken likes to attack defenses. But Monken also knows a lot about Baltimore. That's what makes this reunion so dangerous for both sides. The problem is, once you start looking closely at the Browns' current roster, especially offensively, you start seeing an issue that could become a major problem for Monken very quickly. Honestly, I think it's impossible to look at these games and see them as just 2 more games on the schedule. It doesn't feel that way at all. This feels like the kind of matchup where both sides walk onto the field trying to prove something. Todd Monken left Baltimore as a highly respected figure inside the organization. But now he's on the other side of the division. And in the AFC North, that completely changes how people look at you. During his time with the Ravens, it became obvious how much of an impact he had on the offense. Lamar Jackson probably played the most balanced football of his career during that stretch, especially as a passer. And to me, one of the biggest signs of Monken's influence is the fact that people started viewing Lamar differently after that offensive jump. He wasn't just seen as an explosive running quarterback anymore. The offense became more unpredictable, more aggressive, and much harder to defend. But now comes the really fascinating part of all this. Monken is about to face a defense he knows extremely well. But the Ravens also know a lot about his tendencies as a play caller. And honestly, I love these kinds of mental battles in the NFL. Because it's not just about talent. There's strategy involved. There's silent trash talk. There's that feeling of, I know exactly how you think. And when that kind of tension shows up inside the AFC North, things usually get intense very fast. At the same time, I also think Baltimore enters these games with a huge emotional advantage. The Ravens already have an identity, a strong roster, and stability. Cleveland still feels like a team trying to figure out exactly what it wants to be offensively. And that's where the pressure on Monken really starts to build, because there's a huge difference between running a ready-made offense in Baltimore and trying to build something new against a team that already knows a lot of your tricks. This is where I think things start getting really complicated for Cleveland, because when you look at the Browns' offense right now, honestly, it still feels like a team with way too many unanswered questions. Is there talent? Absolutely. Is there potential? Sure, but there's still no real identity. You don't look at this offense and immediately understand what they want to be. And in a division as physical and aggressive as the AFC North, that becomes a serious problem fast. The running game does look promising. Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson give Cleveland hope for a strong future on the ground, and I really believe the Browns want to build around that. But today's NFL demands way more than just running the football effectively. You have to scare defenses through the air too, and that's exactly where the concerns start showing up. The receiver room is still very young, inconsistent, and full of uncertainty, but nothing feels shakier than the quarterback situation. And honestly, until Cleveland figures that out, it's hard to imagine this offense becoming truly dangerous. Because no matter how smart Todd Monken is as a play designer, and he's extremely smart, eventually the talent on the field has to match the scheme. And right now, I still think there's a pretty massive gap between what Baltimore offers offensively and what Cleveland currently brings to the table. And that makes these matchups against the Ravens even tougher for the Browns. Baltimore is not the kind of defense that gives you time to find yourself halfway through the season. The Ravens pressure quarterbacks, create confusion, and take advantage of emotional instability fast. So in my opinion, Monken may quickly realize that taking over Cleveland inside this division is a much heavier challenge than it looked when he first accepted the job. One thing I truly believe is that Todd Monken is going to feel a completely different kind of pressure when he faces Baltimore. And I'm not just talking about rivalry pressure. I'm talking about expectations. Because when you leave a successful team to become a head coach inside the same division, everybody immediately starts comparing both sides nonstop. If the Ravens keep winning while the Browns struggle, the pressure on Monken is going to rise incredibly fast. And honestly, I think it's impossible for that not to affect him emotionally at some level. Baltimore is where Monken rebuilt his reputation in a massive way. That's where people started looking at him again as one of the top offensive minds in football. So now there's almost a natural need for him to prove he can lead a successful project on his own. And I really think these games against Baltimore are going to become the ultimate test for him. Meanwhile, the Ravens are going to enter these matchups extremely motivated too. There's always internal pride when a franchise wants to prove it stayed strong after losing important people. And I can absolutely picture Baltimore using that as fuel during preparation week. Not out of anger or bitterness, but with that classic NFL mentality. You left? Okay, now prove you can beat us. And that creates a really dangerous situation for Cleveland. Because if the Browns come into these games still looking inconsistent offensively, the pressure on Monken could explode very quickly. Fans will start questioning everything, the media will constantly compare him to Baltimore, and every mistake will feel amplified inside the division. And honestly, I don't think people fully realize how massive the expectations already are for him before the season even starts. If you're enjoying this breakdown, smash that like button to help the purple flock grow. In my opinion, there's a very real feeling that Baltimore wants to turn these matchups into a statement inside the division. Not in some revenge-driven dramatic way, but in that classic NFL way of showing strength. Because when an important coordinator leaves to coach a division rival, the former team naturally wants to prove it's still operating at a higher level. And honestly, I think the Ravens are absolutely going to enter these games with that mindset. What makes this even more interesting is that Baltimore looks far more prepared for this moment right now. The roster already has an identity. Lamar Jackson is still the center of everything offensively, and the team feels much more emotionally stable overall. Meanwhile, Cleveland still feels like a team trying to fit new pieces together on the fly. And usually, when you face a fully established team before even figuring out who you are offensively, things can spiral fast. There's also another detail here that I think matters a lot. The Ravens know Monken's aggressive play-calling style extremely well. They know how he likes attacking certain areas of the field. They understand his tendencies on third downs, and they know his mindset in big moments. That creates a very interesting strategic advantage for Baltimore in these matchups. And when you combine that with a physical, experienced defense, things could get uncomfortable for Cleveland very quickly. That's why I honestly believe these games could end up defining a lot emotionally inside the AFC North. If Baltimore dominates Cleveland, the narrative around Monken changes immediately. The pressure grows, doubts start appearing, and the emotional weight of facing the Ravens gets even heavier moving forward. But if Monken manages to compete evenly, or even pull off a win, then the entire conversation changes overnight. And honestly, that quiet underlying tension is exactly what makes these matchups feel so fascinating before the season even begins. These games against the Ravens could end up meaning a whole lot more than just the Browns' position in the AFC North standings. To me, this feels like the kind of matchup that could completely shape the narrative around Todd Monken during his very first year as Cleveland's head coach. Because if Baltimore dominates these meetings, the pressure on him is going to explode fast. But if he manages to go toe-to-toe with the Ravens, then the entire conversation around him changes immediately. The most fascinating part of all this is the atmosphere surrounding these reunions. Monken knows the Ravens inside and out, understands how this team thinks, and fully understands Baltimore's mentality. But the Ravens also know a lot about his offensive style, and I truly believe that's going to make these games way more intense than most people realize right now. This feels like one of those rivalries that starts quietly and suddenly becomes huge during the season. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Todd Monken will actually beat the Ravens in 2026? Or does Baltimore enter these matchups as the clear favorite? And honestly, do you think he made the right decision taking the Browns' job in the first place? Let me know in the comments because I really want to hear your take on this situation. And if you're a true Ravens fan and love keeping up with everything happening around the team, don't leave this video without sharing it with a friend who's just as passionate. They're definitely going to enjoy this. See those videos on your screen right now? I picked the first one especially for you, and the other is recommended by YouTube. Go check them out and I'll see you in the next video.